Did you know there was a time when you could pinpoint someone's street trade and even class just by listening to them speak? Before television flattened regional voices and motorways shuffled communities, Britain was a patchwork of accents so thick that neighbouring towns could barely understand each other. In this video, I'll show you 10 old British accents you rarely hear today. Dialects shaped by docks, mines, mills and market squares. Now softened by time, mobility, and the relentless march of estuary English. If you remember a grandparent's broad Yorkshire or a dockside scouse that sounded like music, hit the like button and subscribe. Cockney was the voice of London's East End, spoken by working class and lower middle class families in tight-knit neighbourhoods around the docks, markets and terraced streets. It wasn't just an accent, it was an identity, a badge of belonging that marked you out as a proper East Ender. The sound was unmistakable. The th became F or V, so think turned into fink, and brother became brother. The letter H was routinely dropped. Glottal stops replaced hard T's, wa for water, bua for butter, and rhyming slang added a playful coded twist to everyday speech. You'd hear apples and pears for stairs, trouble and strife for wife, and dog and bone for phone, a linguistic game that outsiders found baffling, but locals used with pride. But Cockney began to fade after the Second World War. Slum clearances moved families out to new estates in Essex and beyond, breaking up the communities that had kept the dialect alive. Gentrification brought wealthier incomers who didn't speak the old way, and younger generations grew up hearing estuary English and multicultural London English on the streets and screens. Today, hearing a true Cockney accent, the kind spoken by market traders, pearly kings and queens, or the characters in old British films, evokes a vanished London of pie and mash shops, bomb site kids, and the warmth of a pub sing-along. It's a voice that conjures memories of resilience, humour, and a working-class world that no longer exists in quite the same way. Scouse is the accent of Liverpool, born in the city's docks and shaped by waves of Irish and Welsh immigration in the 19th and early 20th centuries. It was the voice of working-class Liverpudlians, dockers, sailors, factory hands, and market traders whose speech became as distinctive as the city itself. The accent is nasal and rapid, with elongated vowels that give it a musical, almost sing-song quality. Words are clipped short or stretched long, and the intonation rises and falls in patterns that sound like no other British accent. Scousers developed their own vocabulary too. LR for friend, boss for good, scran for food, and bevied for drunk. It was a dialect that bound communities together, a shared code that marked you out as one of their own. But the strongest forms of Scouse have softened over the decades. Liverpool's docks declined, industries closed, and economic hardship pushed many families out to the suburbs or beyond. Younger speakers, exposed to television and national media, began to adopt milder, more general northern accents, blending Scouse features with something closer to mainstream speech. The broad, guttural Scouse of the mid-20th century, the kind you'd hear in old newsreels or early Beatles interviews, became rarer with each generation. Today, hearing that old-style Scouse evokes memories of bustling docklands, packed terraces at Anfield, and a sense of humour so quick and cutting that outsiders struggled to keep up. It's a voice that reminds people of a time when Liverpool's identity was forged in hardship, pride, and an unshakable sense of community. GEORDIE is the accent of Newcastle and the surrounding Tyneside area, rooted in the old Northumbrian dialect and shaped by centuries of coal mining, shipbuilding, and working-class life. It was spoken by pitmen, riveters, and dockers, families who lived in tight rows of terraced houses and kept a dialect that outsiders often found completely unintelligible. The vowels are pronounced in ways that baffle even other northerners. Town sounds like toon, brown becomes brune, and home turns into hyem. GEORDIE has its own vocabulary too. Words like gan for go, bairn for child, canny for good or nice, and ho way for come on. The rhythm is fast and bouncing, with a warmth that many listeners find instantly appealing, even if they can't understand a word. But the broadest Geordie has softened over the decades. Dialect levelling, driven by television, education, and increased mobility, has eroded the thickest features, especially among younger speakers in urban areas. The mining communities that once kept the accent alive have dwindled since the pits closed, and many families moved away or adopted more neutral speech to fit in elsewhere. Still, Geordie remains strong in pockets, particularly in rural Northumberland and among older generations. Hearing the old, unfiltered Geordie conjures up memories of colliery bands, the clang of shipyards on the Tyne, and the fierce pride of a region that never lost its identity. It's a voice that speaks of resilience, humour, and a working-class culture that refused to be forgotten, even as the industries that built it disappeared. Brummie is the accent of Birmingham, the industrial heartland of the Midlands, and for generations it was the voice of factory workers, metal workers, and the vast working-class communities that powered Britain's manufacturing boom. It was an accent long stereotyped as dull or monotonous, yet it carried a resilience and warmth that outsiders rarely acknowledged. The sound is flat and nasal, with a distinctive intonation that rises and falls in unexpected places. Words in the strut set are pronounced like foot, so love sounds like louvre and cup becomes coupe. There's no bath trap vowel split either, so bath rhymes with laugh and sounds like bath. The rhythm is steady and unhurried, giving Brummie a grounded, matter-of-fact quality that some found charming and others dismissed. But Brummie has softened significantly since the mid-20th century. Post-war migration brought waves of newcomers whose speech blended with local patterns, while social mobility and media influence pushed many speakers towards more neutral accents. The broadest Brummie, the kind spoken in the back-to-backs of Aston or the factories of Smethwick, became rarer with each generation. Today, hearing old-style Brummie evokes memories of car factories, the clatter of metalwork, and the street life immortalised in Peaky Blinders. It recalls characters like Beryl Reid's radio persona, whose catchphrase, "She knows, you know," became a beloved emblem of Birmingham humour. It's a voice that speaks of hard graft, community pride, and a city that built the modern world, even if the rest of Britain never quite gave it the respect it deserved. Broad Yorkshire was the accent of the mills, mines and farming communities that defined the West Riding, spoken by generations of weavers, colliers and agricultural workers across Leeds, Bradford, Halifax and the Dales. It was a dialect of substance and plainness, reflecting the no-nonsense character of the people who spoke it. The vowels were clipped and distinct. Love sounded like Louvre, right became right, and about turned into abat. The glottal stop replaced the T in the middle, an end of words, so water became wa-er, and better turned into beer. Speakers used thee and thou well into the 20th century, a remnant of older English that gave the dialect a timeless, almost archaic quality. Phrases like awat for anything, nout for nothing, and I for yes were everyday currency, spoken with a directness that left no room for ambiguity. But the strongest forms of Yorkshire dialect began to fade after the decline of heavy industry. The closure of pits and mills scattered communities, and television brought southern and estuary accents into homes across the county. Younger speakers softened their vowels, dropped the thee and thou, and adopted a more general northern accent that retained a Yorkshire flavour without the full weight of the old dialect. The broad Yorkshire of the 1950s and 60s, the kind you'd hear in Last of the Summer Wine or spoken by old farmers at Skipton Market, became a rarity, kept alive mostly by older generations in rural areas. Today, hearing that thick rolling Yorkshire evokes memories of cobbled streets, mill chimneys at dawn, and the warmth of a Yorkshire tea room. It's a voice that speaks of hard work, straight talking, and a pride in place that time could never quite erase. The old Lancashire accent, particularly the broad dialect spoken in mill towns like OLDHAM, Rochdale and Wigan, was shaped by cotton mills, coal pits and tight-knit working-class communities. It was a distinctive sound, heavier and more nasal than modern Mancunian, with vowels that flattened and lengthened in ways that marked speakers as unmistakably Lancashire. Words like book sounded like book, look became look, and the face vowel in make or take was pronounced with a long open sound closer to mek or tek. The accent had a sing-song quality, with rising and falling intonation that gave even simple sentences a musical rhythm. Vocabulary was rich with dialect words: barm cake for a bread roll, ginnel for an alleyway, mithered for bothered, and nesh for feeling the cold. It was a language of the streets, the factory floor, and the terraced house, spoken by people whose lives were bound to the rhythms of industrial labour. But the old Lancashire accent has largely disappeared, absorbed into the broader Manchester accent, or softened by dialect levelling and social mobility. The decline of the cotton industry in the 1960s and 70s broke up the communities that had sustained the dialect, and younger speakers grew up hearing a more generalised northern accent on television and in schools. The thickest Lancashire voices, the kind spoken by mill workers, market traders and corner shop owners, became rarer with each generation, surviving mainly among older speakers in rural and ex-industrial areas. Today, hearing that old Lancashire accent evokes memories of mill chimneys against grey skies, clogs clattering on cobbles and the warmth of a working men's club. It's a voice that recalls a world of hard graft, dry humour and a fierce pride in community that no amount of change could entirely erase. The Black Country accent, spoken in the industrial heartland just west of Birmingham, Dudley, Walsall, Wolverhampton and the surrounding towns, was forged in the furnaces, forges and coal mines that gave the region its name. It was a dialect of iron and grit, spoken by generations of metalworkers, chain makers and colliers whose lives were defined by heavy labour and tight community bonds. The accent is distinctly different from Brummie, with sharper, more nasal vowels and a rhythmic lilt that sets it apart. The vowel in words like night and right is pronounced as a diphthong closer to noit or roit, and the strut vowel is rounded, so love sounds like louve and cup becomes coop. The Black Country has its own rich vocabulary too: borstin for excellent, wench for a young woman, yam yam as a nickname for locals, and aubinya, meaning how are you? It was a language of the workshop, the market and the pub, spoken with pride by people who knew their place in the world and weren't about to apologise for it. But the broadest Black Country accents have softened significantly since the decline of heavy industry. The closure of foundries and collieries in the 1970s and 80s scattered communities and pushed many families towards softer, more generalised Midland speech. Younger speakers, influenced by television and increased mobility, began to drop the thickest dialect features, and the old vocabulary faded from everyday use. The Black Country accent of the 1950s and 60s, the kind spoken by old ironworkers or heard in factory canteens, became rarer with each passing decade. Today, hearing that old unfiltered Black Country voice evokes memories of blast furnaces lighting up the night sky, the clang of hammers on metal, and a sense of community rooted in shared hardship. It's a voice that speaks of resilience, humour, and a working-class identity that refused to be forgotten, even as the industries that built it disappeared. Broad Bristolian was the distinctive accent of Bristol and the surrounding West Country, spoken by dockers, factory workers, and market traders in one of Britain's great port cities. It was a dialect that outsiders found puzzling, and locals wore with pride, marked by a feature almost unique in England: the Bristol L. This was an intrusive L sound added to words ending in vowels, so area became aerial, idea turned into ideal, and the famous local phrase Bristol fashion was pronounced bristle fashion. The accent also had a rich rolling quality with elongated vowels and a rhythm that felt slower and more deliberate than the sharper accents of the southeast. Words like bath were pronounced with a long A sound, and R was often pronounced after vowels in a way that gave the accent a rural West Country flavour. Vocabulary was peppered with local terms: girt lush for very good, where's it to for where is it, and all right my baba as a friendly greeting. It was a warm, open accent that reflected the character of the city itself, but broad Bristolian has softened considerably since the mid-20th century. The closure of the docks, the decline of traditional industries and the arrival of new communities all contributed to a gradual levelling of the accent. Younger speakers, influenced by television and national media, began to drop the Bristol L and adopt more neutral vowels, blending Bristolian features with something closer to general southern speech. The thickest Bristolian voices, the kind spoken by old dockers or heard in the markets of St. Nicholas, became rarer with each generation. Today, hearing that old Bristolian accent evokes memories of the harbour at dawn, the smell of tobacco from the imperial factory, and the warmth of a city that was proud, independent, and never afraid to speak its own way. It's a voice that recalls a time when Bristol's identity was rooted in trade, industry, and a fierce sense of place. Received pronunciation, or RP, was once the gold standard of British speech, the accent of the upper classes, the BBC, the professions, and anyone who aspired to sound educated and refined. It was an accent without a region, a carefully cultivated voice that signalled class, privilege, and social authority. The old RP of the 1930s to 1960s was far more clipped and formal than the version spoken today, with exaggerated vowels and a rigid pronunciation that now sounds almost theatrical. Words like house were pronounced heis, off became orf, and really turned into really. The vowels were crisp and precise, the consonants sharp, and the overall effect was one of distance and superiority. It was the voice of newsreaders like Alva Liddell, actors like John Gielgud, and politicians from a bygone era. It was also the accent children from upper-class families were trained to speak, regardless of where they actually grew up. But old-fashioned RP began to fade in the 1960s and 70s as social attitudes shifted and the rigid class hierarchies it represented started to crumble. The BBC relaxed its accent requirements, regional voices appeared on television and radio, and younger generations rejected the stuffiness of the old elite accent. Modern RP became softer, more neutral, and less obviously upper class, blending in rather than standing out. The hyper-formal RP of the pre-war era, the kind spoken by the Queen in early broadcasts or heard in old Pathé newsreels, became a rarity, preserved mainly in archive recordings and parodies. Today, hearing that old RP evokes memories of a Britain that was more stratified, more formal, and more deferential. It's a voice that speaks of garden parties, country houses, and a world where accent was destiny, where how you spoke determined not just who you were, but who you could ever hope to become. Estuary English is the accent that swept across the southeast from the 1980s onwards, softening Cockney, diluting RP, and becoming the dominant voice of modern London and the home counties. It's neither working class nor upper class, neither regional nor received, but something in between, a levelled, accessible accent that feels neutral enough to belong anywhere. It took features from Cockney, glottal stops, L vocalisation, the softening of TH, and blended them with the intonation and vocabulary of more middle-class speech. Words like water became war, milk turned into muke, and all right was shortened to ait. But unlike Cockney, Estuary English didn't mark you out as working class or tie you to a particular neighbourhood. It was mobile, flexible, and socially acceptable. The perfect accent for a Britain that was becoming more fluid, more urban, and less tied to old-class boundaries. Estuary English spread rapidly, carried by television, pop culture, and the movement of people out of inner London to the suburbs and beyond. It became the voice of EastEnders, football commentary, and a new generation of broadcasters who sounded approachable rather than posh. Younger speakers across the southeast adopted it, and even those who once spoke broad Cockney or rural Kent accents began to shift towards this new middle ground. By the 1990s and 2000s, Estuary English was everywhere, and the old accents it replaced were fading fast. Today, it's the sound of modern Britain, practical, unpretentious, and unencumbered by the baggage of class or region. But for those who remember the voices it replaced, Estuary English is a reminder of what was lost: the rich variety, the local pride, and the sense that where you came from shaped not just what you said, but how you said it. And that's it for today's journey through Britain's vanishing voices. From the docks of Liverpool to the mills of Yorkshire, the forges of the Black Country to the drawing rooms of the old elite, these accents told stories of who we were and where we came from. Some faded because industries collapsed, others because communities scattered, and many simply because the world moved on. If this video brought back memories of a grandparent's speech, a neighbour's greeting, or a phrase you haven't heard in decades, give it a like and let us know in the comments which accent you miss the most. Don't forget to subscribe for more trips down memory lane. See you next time.